Hey everybody, this is John with another installment of Think Culture, and I'm doing a short video right now. I don't know whether this genre of video, whether this format is interesting, is valuable, is something that I should be doing or should do, or whether it's crap and it's annoying and it's garbage. But I'm doing it obviously right now, so let me know what you think about it. But this is going to just be a short video on, a specific topic. And the topic that I wanted to talk about was sort of about habits of thinking, right? Lazy habits of thinking. Habits that are easy to get into. This is about sort of thinking, how to think, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm giving you an introductory course on reasoning or critical thinking or something like that. That's obviously not what I intend to be doing. This is just kind of general advice for someone who's engaged in, including myself, someone who's engaged in trying to think deeply about things, try to engage with difficult literature, right? Difficult works of philosophy or political theory or whatever. Because I tend to fall into kind of these errors. I was prompted to do that because I've been preparing for this to do a video on the crisis of the European mind. It's a work of intellectual history. It's really good. And reading in it about Bossuet, he's this French bishop and theologian, and the debates that he's continually having with these so-called free thinkers who are critical of the church, critical of the monarchy. They're Enlightenment figures. They're like the philosophes or whatever. These are the guys hanging out in the salons saying, no gods, no masters or whatever. and reformers, Lutherans, Calvinists, people like that. But he's engaged in debate with all these people, and it got me to thinking about the way these debates play out and the way that they've played out for me in the past. I used to be one of these kind of like rabid atheist guys who's constantly debating people. Like, I'd go to high school and be like, here's an argument for why God doesn't exist and you're a loser or whatever. Just total stupid stuff. But yeah, it got me thinking about that. And then I was thinking about it, and I decided to make this video to kind of talk about two kind of mental habits that are a problem and that tended to be a problem for me. The two kind of mental habits, and I'm going to give examples of them that I think are very good examples, and the first one is connected to the Bossuet stuff. So the first one is the confusion of saying something, being able to articulate something, something sounding good or rational or whatever, and being able to understand something, right? To be able to actually think something. Because I've had a tendency, sort of throughout my life, to bring it back to me, of reading in such a way that I just let the words kind of wash over me, right? Like I'm reading some kind of word tapestry, like it's a kind of verbal puzzle. The pieces are being put together or whatever. I'll be able to retrieve certain pieces and put them in the right place to kind of re-articulate the thing, maybe, whatever. But it just kind of like lets the words wash over me, right? That's one of them. And yeah, I've had that tendency. Rather than, or as opposed to, sitting down and really thinking about what is being said. I don't think those two things are the same thing. I think that you could read your Beyond Good and Evil, or whatever you want to read. You could read your Plato's Republic, which I'm about to talk about for a second. And, you're told a story, like, even if it's philosophical essay, like that it kind of is a story. It's just this succession of words that, I don't know. And I don't, that's something that should be avoided. I think it's an easy habit to fall into. It's an easy problem to fall into. I think we all fall into it sometimes, right? You have this experience where you're reading a paragraph, you finish the paragraph, and you're like, what the hell did I just read? Read the paragraph again. Still have no idea what I read. It's just this succession of words. It's sounds. It's You know, it's a kind of, I don't know, meaningless poem. I'm not to say that poems are meaningless or anything like that, but you get my point. And then the other problem is making distinctions that are important, that are central, that are crucial, that are essential. I think that we all also sometimes fall into the habit of what's it called? Breaking straw? What's it called? I don't know. Splitting hairs and stuff like that. What that means is you're making distinctions which are irrelevant, right? You're not focused on what's essential to the matter at hand, right? You may be distinguishing things. You're thinking about the differences of things. You're differentiating things, but you're doing so in kind of a haphazard way that loses sight of what is essential. Okay, so those are the two things that I'm going to give examples of. The first example, this goes back to my high school asshole days, right? And it's connected to Bossuet because we're talking about a theological argument, the cosmological argument from infinite regress, basically, right? Because I think that there's a response to that atheists, materialists, whatever, make, and they think that it's something like a knockdown argument of the theist. Wait 1 second. My mom has my son, and she's texting me 1 second. Oh, he's eating a bunch. That's good. But, what was I saying? They think that it's a knockdown argument of the theist, right? They think that they have a rebuttal that's profound. It's got I think it has a lot of cultural cachet. I think people don't know how to respond to it. And I think that that response is guilty of this, you can say it, but you can't think it sort of phenomenon. So the way that it works, the way that I was thinking about presenting this example is, so one person, the theist, he says, everything has to have a cause, so the theist says, I think there's something outside of the universe. There's something more than the universe. There's something more to all this than the physical world, right? And then the atheist says, or the materialist, whatever, he thinks that the universe is a self-sufficient whole. It's mechanistic, it's physical, whatever. Okay? And so the atheist says, so the theist says, okay, everything has to have a cause. We go back, what could be the first cause? This is infinite regress, right? What caused the Big Bang? Whatever caused the Big Bang? Where did that stuff come from? Where did matter originally come from? You can't get something from nothing. You could go that direction too. But, so basically the idea is, what's the first cause? And the idea of infinite regress doesn't make sense if you're talking about a mechanistic universe, right? So this is a problem. And I think the atheists tend to respond by saying, look, that's how I used to respond. Look, if you can imagine a being, God, that stands outside of the system of causes and effects, right? Well, he'll say, what caused God? Okay, and then the theist will say, he's self-caused, he's eternal, something like to that effect. And then the atheist responds, if you can imagine a being, an entity, something that is self-caused or eternal, why can't you that's how the universe is. The universe is self-caused or eternal. How about that? Why can't you imagine a self-caused or eternal universe? Right? And this is sort of perceived as kind of a knockdown argument against the theist, but I think that this is actually an argument that's effective against the atheist. Why do I think that? Because you can say a universe in which it's self-caused, right? You can say a physical, mechanistic world that has always existed, that's outside of cause and effect in some sense, right? But I'm arguing that that's unintelligible. You can't really say that. It's like, you can't think it. You can say round circle or square circle. Yeah, round square circle. You can say that, but you can't think it. Okay? So why can't you think that, right? The idea of God is that something exists outside of the mechanism of cause and effect. Something which is outside of, beyond of, transcendent of the principle of non-contradiction. something beyond the physical, right? That is that idea. So when the atheists suggest that, okay, the universe is this physical, self-sufficient whole in which the laws of physics apply, cause and effect applies, the principle of non-contradiction applies, that's how we can know things, it's all physical, material, this leads to this, etc. Okay, they say that, but then when they add in, but when we go back far enough, it's just self-caused or something. All of a sudden, we're breaking the rule of causation. We're violating the principle of causation. We're violating the principle of non-contradiction, ultimately. And so they're sneaking in the perspective of the theist. The theist perspective is not, there is no physical universe. Physical laws don't apply. There is no cause and effect. There isn't a mechanistic nature, right? That's not their perspective. Their perspective is there's that, and then there's something outside of it. So when the atheist suggests that the universe, he's saying that the universe, there's a problem in this conception of it as self-sufficient, and we have to include, he's including now, an element which is beyond that, something that's supernatural, something that stands outside of cause and effect. It's all causes and effects, it's all mechanism, but then when you get back far enough, something has to violate that idea, right? That's what they're ultimately saying. And so to me, it's like if you actually think about it, the idea of a self-sufficient mechanistic universe of cause and effect in which at some point you have to have something be self-caused, right? That's a self-defeating position. You've adopted the perspective of the theist because you're saying there's this natural world and then something has to stand outside of it. The beginning of the natural world is a contradiction, and I require to include within my world picture now an element that has to stand outside of it. Everything is cause and effect except this one thing, right? So if you actually think about it, it's a victory for the theist, right? Because the idea of a self-sufficient universe of causation and physical laws, which has an element in it which is not physical, which is not material, which is not part of a series of causation. You can't think those two things at the same time. You've included this separate element that's outside of the physical world, right? Okay, so that's one example. I think it's an interesting one. And then the second example I want to talk about, this made me think about when I last read The Republic. Socrates makes a strong argument for the division of labor. People have different natural affinities, abilities, dispositions, whatever. There's diversity among human beings, diversity of talents and interests and things like that. And so his argument is basically, you let the people who are well suited to something do that something, and only that something, so that they can do it the best, right? You have someone who has a great aptitude for being a cobbler or a blacksmith or something like that, right? You don't want him also cooking and cleaning and doing war and all this other kind of stuff, because then that just detracts from the focus of his super ability in the area where it's most useful, right? So he has this principle of division of labor. It's important. It's connected with the way that he thinks about justice. But then he says later that women can be guardians. There's three classes: auxiliaries, guardians, producers, and he says that basically women can be in any one of them. Women can be guardians. They can be the rulers. That's what he's saying. And so someone responds to Socrates by saying, look, you have this principle of the division of labor. People that are different are supposed to be doing different things. Men and women are very different, right? There's a ton of difference between men and women. We maybe can't grab two like natural groups that have more difference. And so they should be doing different things, obviously, if we're operating according to this idea of the division of labor. And I think that if you read that superficially, it's easy for the reader to think, wow, this is a really good argument. This is a great argument. Why? Because you're thinking about difference. You're thinking about two different kinds of differences with the one word, basically. right? You're covering over them. You're making a distinction without a difference. You're not focused on what the essential difference is, right? If you're talking about a blacksmith, if you have a blacksmith that's, strong enough to wield the hammer and stuff like that, and as good as a blacksmith in that sense, and then you have a guy who's like really weak and can't pick it up, that's a difference. And the guy that's too weak shouldn't be being a blacksmith, right? That's an essential difference. If you have someone with blue eyes versus brown eyes, that's an inessential difference. You obviously wouldn't say, okay, we have blue-eyed guys working as blacksmiths. If they have brown eyes, that's different. It's a difference, and so they should be doing something else. That doesn't make any sense. So likewise, Socrates says, when you think about men and women, and the way that I'm articulating this idea of classes in connection to the soul, the tripartite conception of the soul, rational, spirited, appetitive, right? It's the rational, dominant people, the rational part of their soul is dominant. They're the ones that become the guardians. Okay? And so the question was not, are men and women different? Of course they're different. They're extremely different. The question is, are they different in a way that is essential for this question of what class they should belong to, right? Or what they should be doing. So the question is, are there women who have a dominant spirited part of their soul? If so, they should be auxiliaries. Are there women who have a dominant appetitive part of their soul? If so, they should be producers. Are there women who have a dominant rational part of their soul? If so, they should be guardians. Right? The difference that is essential or crucial in this aspect, because it's this configuration of the soul that determines what class you're a part of. In that sense, men and women are not different. We have the same tripartite soul. Okay? You might find, as Socrates says about many different aptitudes and things like that, that they're distributed differently among men and women. You might find that there are way less women with this dominant spirited part of their soul. But the ones with the dominant spirited part of their soul, it would be an injustice to make them a ruler or a producer. Right? Because it's the part of it's the soul that's the relevant factor. Okay? So in that sense, there is no difference. So there's differences, and then there's essential differences. And if you're covering over both of them with this one word difference, then you can be confused into thinking that people with blue eyes and brown eyes should be doing different things. That's essentially what this guy is saying when he's saying men and women, they're different, they should have different roles. Right? And so I think that this is the second error in terms of a habit of mind that I wanted to talk about. The first one, to reiterate, is it's different to say something and to think something or to understand something. You can say square circle. You can't understand square circle. You can say that you have the universe, which is physical, mechanistic, cause and effect, principle of non-contradiction, and yet it is uncaused. But you can't think that. It is unthinkable. It's not intelligible. Right? You have to, especially when we're dealing with things that are so abstract, I think that this becomes a big problem, right? Square circle isn't so abstract. It's a shape. We can imagine shapes pretty easily, right? And we can't imagine that one. But when we're talking about the super abstract, the nature of the universe, infinity, God, transcendence and immanence, things like that, then I think that we run this risk a lot more of confusing saying for thinking, saying for understanding. Okay? And I think that, all of us do this. And we should be careful not to. And then, the second one that we were just talking about is this issue of focusing on the essential difference, the essential distinction that's being made. Right? Not being distracted, confused by, and this is also a kind of a language thing, right? Because there's two different kinds of differences, a difference and a distinction, you might say. And when you paper over those with the same word, the phenomenon of their internal difference is lost to you, right? So there's a linguistic component to that too. But I'm stressing that one should always be careful to focus on the essential differences, what's essential in the matter, right? To hone in on the core problem, the core issue. But anyway, that's a quick little, maybe silly video, maybe annoying video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, or dislike, unsubscribe, whatever. But some sense of some form of feedback would be cool. Whether I should do short little stupid videos as well sometimes. Maybe not. If that's the case, or otherwise, expect a video on this coming out within the next day or two probably. Remember, don't simply react, but think culture.